Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast. I'm your host, Dan from the Simple Electronics YouTube channel. This episode is brought to you by PCBWay. But before that, I've got a very special guest, Ian Scott Johnston. How are you?
Hi, Dan. I'm good.
Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, you did. Yes. Common problem, but yes, you did.
Yeah, I was just explaining on the pre-chat that I have a little bit of dyslexia, and I kept looking for your channel as Johnson, not Johnston.
Yeah, common problem. Had it all my life about Johnston, Johnson, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, you got it.
So I see you. Actually, I've actually found I've known about you for longer than I've known you had a YouTube channel because you kept showing up in some live stream chats, if I'm not mistaken. Could you let everyone know on the listening to the podcast a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I'm semi-retired, I think you would call it. And I've been working in electronics all my life. I built a home workshop a number of years ago. I've had many different avenues of work life, but electronics was always number one. I started designing and selling my own test instruments, which I recently stopped doing, and I want to concentrate a little bit more on my YouTube channel. So that's basically me.
And I think that's like most makers, it's hard to really put you in a box. So let me just describe what I see in your YouTube channel. So I am a contract professor for the automotive repair, and what I see in your YouTube channel is kind of the philosophies that I try to instill in my students when it comes to electrical. We don't really do electronic, but electrical diagnostic and repair. So your channel is kind of like a come see how I did this, but also sort of the slow and methodical fault finding that makes it so that people looking over your shoulder sort of like are absorbing information at the same time as being entertained. Is that about right? Did I about get the gist of your channel?
Yes. Yeah, that's spot on. And that comes from my professional work life in electronics. Of course, I started electronics when I was a kid, but I started my work life in electronics in 1984, working for a drilling instrumentation and controls company here in Scotland. And basically, we were manufacturing from the BOM all the way up to the finished article. And we had workshops full of young and old electronics technicians assembling that equipment and all the circuit boards, etc. And being a charge hand or a workshop technical leader, I was in charge of showing the new people how to go about assembling circuit boards, repairing, calibrating, the whole thing. So my whole work life was in that vein. And so when it came to starting my YouTube channel, I could only do it the one way. I just immediately, the very first video, turned on the camera and I went back into that work mode of explaining what I was doing and why on the videos. And I never even thought about it. It just naturally came out that way.
So let's start at the beginning. Now you're saying you guys were back at your first job in electronics. You started by sort of going from BOM and to the YouTube writers, that's BOM, not BOMB, all the way to finished product. So are you saying that in-house, you guys would go and do breadboard prototyping to circuit board creating and to assembly and to finished product all in-house?
Yeah, it was only a small company. I think in its heyday, it was something like 35 or 40 people. But when I started there in 1984, there was only about 10 people. And that was before the days of through-hole plating and stuff like that. So we had all the tanks for actually etching and exposing our circuit boards, and and that was before as well the CAD side of it on the electronics. I mean, it was when I started, we just finished using the old tape layout 2-to-1s for actually laying out the PCBs. So we did everything from laying out PCBs, whether it was CAD or tape, right through to assembling the circuit boards with a parts department who ordered all the bits, an R&D department, which I eventually moved into, sales, and of course the boss at the top. And so everything was handled in-house. And I think part of the reason for that is it was a Malaysian-owned company, and they didn't conform to the normal, let's farm this out, farm that out, and all the rest of it. It was because it was Malaysians, we'll do it ourselves and we'll do it our way. And 1984, I was 19 years old, so I came in very green into that, and that's what I learnt to do from them, and it became real natural. And I was there for like 21 years.
Wow, that's a long time. So I think that method of development is less efficient money-wise, but I believe a great investment in the long term, because if your company, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if your company relies on the reliability of electronics to keep going, to be productive, yes, it is expensive to have a full a full workshop filled with people making stuff from the ground up, but the time saved when something does go wrong and you can diagnose and fix it in-house that afternoon, I believe is a massive asset. Am I wrong in saying this?
Yeah, you are right, but it wasn't the main reason for doing it that way. It's like I said, it was just, I don't know if it's a culture thing with Malaysians. Maybe a Malaysian people can chime in here. I don't know, but it was just the way the boss wanted to do it. The man at the top, he wasn't an electronics guy as such. He was more an electrical guy. And I just think it was natural, his natural thoughts to do it that way was to just do everything in-house. But bearing in mind, in 1984, there wasn't the same scope as there was now for farming stuff out. Right now, you can find any amount of companies that can do any part of the process for you. But back then, that wasn't the same. Or if they were more hidden. The internet wasn't really as it is now. So, yeah, it's just the way we did it, back then.
So obviously your YouTube videos reek of experience, but they also seem to reek of education. Do you actually have any formal training in electronics, or is it all on-the-job learning?
All on the job. I've got no qualifications whatsoever in electronics. Again, that comes down to partly due to the Malaysian thing. I was mentored by one of the guys who was a brother-in-law of the boss who worked there, Malaysian as well, and he was a guru. He was like your Steve Jobs. He was absolutely on it technically. For everything from machine code, software, to all the electronics and all the rest of it. So I kind of got mentored by him. I ended up in the R&D department where he worked eventually after about something like 9 years or something like that. And helping him out, and I got taught a lot from him. But no formal qualification whatsoever.
That's incredible. The ease at which you, I mean, maybe it's in editing, right? Sometimes I have to stop and remember I'm watching a YouTube video, but the ease at which you pinpoint faults, explain your reasoning, and I don't know, the general comfort, to me, you can't just get that from experience. So that's really impressive that you have no formal qualifications, but yet you seem more qualified than some people I've run into in the industry. That's incredible. I love it.
Oh, it's very nice of you to say that, Dan. Part of it comes as well is it was a small company, and because we were doing drilling instrumentation and controls, we did absolutely everything. We did, everything, everything analog, everything uh, analog to digital conversion. All the software was written in-house from end to end. We covered everything, multiplexing, every avenue of electronics we did. You know what I mean? And you learn a lot. I learned a lot from that because we weren't just like keyholed in one area. We were covering absolutely everything. Because drill instrumentation, you've got a lot of sensors and all over the platform, and you get them back to a central unit, and you've got displays, you've got discrete displays. This was the days before you had big LCDs, which we eventually moved to. You had discrete display panels, which we didn't buy in. We designed them from scratch. So covering absolutely everything in electronics, apart from high voltage, I must say, we did everything there, and I learned a lot doing that, and especially getting mentored, by the guru at the top there.
That's really impressive stuff. And so where did you go from there? Because if I'm calculating here, 1984, and then your YouTube channel seems to have started about 12 years ago. There is some space in between there, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, I've done a lot of different hobbies. Even back in the early days, about 1994, while I was still with the drill instrumentation company, I have a passion for motorbikes, off-road motorbikes. So I got into that big time, and just when I first got on the internet in 1994, I started up a website for publishing a bit like a motorcycle magazine, for want of another word. And I did that, and it just took off, and I ended up running that for about 6 years. It became the biggest website in the world for off-road trials motorcycles. Everybody was going there for the world championship results, etc. It took me around the world as a side job, if you know what I mean. I still had the day job, and I eventually sold that, and I moved on. And just after that, or not long after that, the drill instrumentation company kind of lost its way a little bit, and I decided to jump ship, and I moved for a desk job in another oil and gas company. And it was during that time there, when I joined that company, I kind of missed the soldering iron. So I started building a home workshop, and that's when I started to build the YouTube channel.
And what sort of inspired you to do the YouTube channel? Because there's tons of people in the world that pick up a soldering iron and never make videos about it. Like, we all have our own reasons. So what inspired you to start your YouTube video?
I think it must be the creativity side of it, because I'd come from, as I mentioned, doing the website for the motorcycles, and that's a creative process to do that. And because I'd been working in the R&D department at a drill instrumentation company, that's creative right from the offset. And everything I've done has been of the creative method. So when it came to the home electronics workshop, and I was doing what I was doing, I just, right off the bat, I just decided I need to get this onto YouTube and be creative there and share it. And that's what I did. I never even thought about it.
Do you remember your first YouTube videos? At least the first ones that I have access to. Do you remember what they're about?
I can't remember, to tell you the truth.
That's
Some of
fine.
the early ones I've got rid of, that were pre Ian Scott Johnston on YouTube. So I don't remember what number one is. You'll know better than me.
So your first 3 videos published on your current YouTube channel are your home-built Segways, the first run, the steering test, and the test with large wheels. Can you talk to us a little bit about that project?
Wow. Yeah. That was, of course, that was pre mass production of segways as we see it now. I don't know. I just had an idea. I built a little H-bridge circuit myself for driving small motors, and I thought, I wonder if I scaled that up. I wonder if I could drive a couple of wheelchair motors. And before I knew it, I just built a little platform for the motors to attach to, because I was into Arduino big time at that time, I just used an Arduino to basically do the control software. So it was the multiple aspects of the electronics hobby, the H-bridge, the motor drive, and the Arduino system that I just decided, wow, I could make a Segway out of this. So it just, I have a passion and I won't let go. And that's basically where the Segway came out of it.
Were you using a MEMS gyro? So COVID has like squished my time perception. So I know there was a big, a big increase in the use of MEMS gyros, and then a big decrease in the cost. Did that happen before the Segway or after the Segway?
The gyros, I'd never used gyros prior to doing the Segway. And of course, when I Googled it and tried to find out how Segways worked and all the rest of it, that's when I realized you started to need gyros and all that sort of thing. And I can't remember the model that I used. It was just whatever was about at the time. And it was like a 5 degrees of freedom, I think they called it, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the one I used. But I made a lot of mistakes with that Segway. It was a little bit uncontrollable. You see me moving about the garden in that video, but it was hard to actually control. And I've since learned that Arduino is nothing like as fast enough, as powerful enough for something like that. You need a lot more power, and to get the speed of it way, way higher. So, but it was just a fun little project. The same happened when I built my first quadcopter. That was completely from scratch as well. The same thing. Although I used a more powerful Arduino for that. I don't know if those videos are on my channel or not.
I don't see them. Again, COVID has squished my time perception. So I was just wondering if someone from the old school, such as yourself, cutting your teeth in the late 80s, would just have figured out a couple different orientations of mercury switches to control the speed.
I'm not that old, Dan.
No. Resourceful is the word I was looking for, not old.
No, there was, gyros around at the time. Like I said, the 5 degrees of freedom, I think they called it, and and other people had made attempts at it or were doing it. So I just tried that, and somebody had written a driver for it for Arduino. So I thought, well, I'll try that. But I was firing in the dark, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, oh, for sure. But that's half the fun, though. That's the half the fun of doing projects is doing stuff that's over your head, and then eventually achieving them. Like, you put your head down and work at something, you're going to get it to work, especially when you have the community on your side like we have now. And that's like half the fun, is to achieve the unachievable previously.
Yeah, I mean, that early videos, I had no real desire to put them on YouTube. I think it was after it was all said and done is when I decided, I'll just put them on YouTube and just let people see what I get up to in the backyard. And
yeah, it was good. If we move forward a little bit, you actually designed and sold a product for quite a while. Can you explain to us what at least, hang on a sec, looking for the name, I don't want to get it wrong, the PDVS2 Mini. Can you explain to us what that is and what inspired you to build a precision digital voltage source?
It came from back in the drill instrumentation company that I was working for, because we did everything from end to end, from the sensor inputs all the way through. we were simulating 0 to 10 volt signals and 4 to 20 milliamp signals and all the rest of it. And we had all these little analog, handheld analog 0 to 10 volt sources. And I always remembered that, and I always liked using them back in the day. And I don't remember the exact reason, but I was in the workshop one day and I was working on something and I needed to simulate a 0 to 10 volt signal. And the normal way nowadays, the normal way back then is you just get a potentiometer across a 10 volt supply and there you go. But you've got to go and hook up a power supply and all that. And I always remembered the little handheld units I'd used years ago. And I thought, well, I'll make one. So I made an analog one with a little DVM display on the front of it and a pot to adjust it, and it was battery powered. But it wasn't that accurate. And I thought, I wonder if I can make this more accurate with a better voltage reference. And I wonder if I could integrate an Arduino into it somehow or other. And that project just took off. I dropped what I was wanting the source for in the first place. I can't even remember what it was. And I thought, wow, I'll make one of these. So I did that. And I made a prototype, and I did send it into Dave Jones's mailbag. And his words when he saw it and powered it up was, Ian has got to start making these. And that was the push I needed to actually just go ahead and start manufacturing them. So basically, it's a very accurate 0 to 10 volt signal source down to 10 microvolt resolution.
Does it just output a constant voltage, or can you have it make go do highs and lows, or is it just a steady output?
The PDVS2 Mini, that wasn't the first version. The first version was called a PDVS or a PDVS2. There was two versions, and it had all sorts of extra functionalities. You could step through different voltages. You could edit via a keypad on the front of it. You could put steps in, something like 5 or 6 steps if you wanted to go from 0 volts to 1 volt to 1.5 back to 0.5. You had all that, and you could step between them, or you could ramp between them as well. And I integrated all that into the very, very first versions. But at the end of the day, when I looked at it, everybody was just using it for its basic function of a user adjustable 0 to 10 volt source. So when it came to the PDVS2 Mini, I decided I wanted to make it smaller and cheaper. So I lost the keyboard, and I just basically had the 0 to 10 volt signal on the output. So that's basically all it does.
Yeah, it's actually quite impressive that you're down in the microvolt. I'm just reading the description here, and it says approximately 10 microvolt steps. Now, being a hobbyist, can you explain to me and maybe the audience who may not know why you would need something with so much precision? Like, what's the goal of having something that has that much precision, and adjustability? Because I have a precision voltage reference, but it has 4 fixed voltages. So what's the advantage of this thing?
Well, when I sold them to everybody. It wasn't just like hobbyists. Hobbyists would buy them to basically test their own multimeters and stuff like that. That's what hobbyists were doing. But I had also companies buying them as well. Some of them are weird and wonderful uses. Some of them, like, there was one commercial customer I had that designed for the medical industry large VFDs, variable frequency drives, and when they sold the drives, they had to sell them with like a calibration or test kit. It was like a little briefcase where you had the basic tools, I suppose a multimeter and a few other bits and pieces in there. And they wanted to be able to verify calibration, or the customer to be able to verify calibration. Maybe it's got something to do with the medical industry, I don't know. So the PDVS2 Mini just sat perfectly for that. And I had another commercial customer over at CERN for the Large Hadron Collider. They bought one to do some testing on their ADCs, their large analog and digital converter units, which tie into their magnets somehow or other. And they wanted to be able to test their ADCs. So there's not just one, customer type. The hobbyist was obviously the biggest. I sold many to them, but mostly for checking their DMMs and stuff like that, or whatever projects they were working on. But the commercial customers, were in there as well.
I find it super interesting that that the words of Dave Jones sort of solidified you building this, and I'm really happy that these kinds of things exist. But before we move on, I was just reading in the specification summary that the stability is 0.00005 volts DC variation worst case. And then it says orientation of the unit may affect output calibrated horizontally. Are you serious? At that level of precision, the orientation makes a difference.
That comes down to the voltage reference I was using, LM399AH, which is a high-end voltage reference, very, very stable. And I think if you read the datasheet or the specs for that, somewhere in there, the orientation of the LM399, the output can be affected, by that. So that's why and in my website for the PDVS2 Mini, I like to just spell it all out. Here's the hide nothing and mention everything, and let the customer read through all that. And if they're still happy to purchase it, then that's fair enough. But yes, a lot of people have found in your DMMs, your Keithley DMMs use the LM399s a lot, Agilent ones as well. And yes, the orientation can affect the output.
That's incredible. I'm also looking, for those of you who are wondering what the price of such a unit costs, I've switched the currency on your website to Canadian dollars, and it's 557 Canadian dollars. And then if I go to US dollars for most of my viewers, by the way, you have a really nice system to switch prices, 408 US dollars. But that brings us to our next point, because there's this big red text on the website that says the design rights to the PDVS2 Mini has been sold. Forwarding information for the new manufacturer will be published soon. What happened?
Well, I kind of semi-retired back in June of last year, and the game, what I was going to do was carry on with the PDVS2 Mini and just make more of them, because the way I used to do it is I'd make batches of 50, and that would last me a certain period of time, and then I'd have no stock for a while. I'd build up some what do you call it? People waiting for stock,
like a pre-order list.
Yeah, no, I didn't have pre-orders. I just had a notify me link on the website where people could note their email address, and I would monitor that list there. And when it got a certain amount of email addresses, I'd then go and build another batch. But when I semi-retired back in June, I kind of had to make the decision: am I going to go and do this and build more, or what am I going to do? And it was, of course, it was post-COVID, and the prices of all the bill of materials and all the parts actually went quite high. And when I did the sums, the profit was actually going to be quite low, so I just didn't bother making any for a while, maybe as high as nearly a year, something like that. And it came to the point where I decided, I wonder if I really want to make any more. I kind of started making more on my YouTube channel, and I wanted to have fun. I didn't want to see the PDVS2 Mini become another day job, because I had semi-retired. So I just decided, I'll put a note out there and see if anyone's interested in acquiring the rights to it. And I had a few companies get in touch, and one of them ticked all the boxes. So I just decided, yep, I'll walk away. The same reason I walked away from the motorcycle magazine on the internet. I could have made that, quite big, but when it starts to become a day job, proper day job, no, it's not really for me.
Just a quick interruption to talk about this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay has been a long-term sponsor of the channel, and I think they're a good match for my channel because they provide quality PCBs for a reasonable price. You can get boards manufactured up to 100 mils by 100 mils for just $5, including shipping to Canada, $15 US, including shipping to USA, $12 US, which is incredibly cheap for professionally manufactured PCBs. I can personally attest to the quality of these PCBs, and so if you want a circuit immortalized forever, check out PCBWay.com with the link in the description. Now back to the conversation. So you're just right now going to be walking to the bank and cashing a check for 50 million pounds or something like that?
No, not quite, not quite. It's a very niche product, the PDVS2 Mini, and it's only worth so much, really. And I'm aware of that. I know how many I'd sold over the 2 or 3 years that I'd actually been making them. So I got what I could get for them, and it was time to walk away. And I'm still in touch with the company that's bought the rights, helping them out, answering a lot of questions, that sort of thing. And actually, they'll be sending me their very first. They're making some modifications, trying to improve it slightly, and they'll be sending me a prototype at some point just to cast my eye over it. So I'll enjoy doing that as well. But yeah, I'm not sad to see the back of it in one way, but I am in another way, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, it's it still is your project, even though the rights have been sold. You still put your blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. Is there sort of like an estimate in when these might be available again for public consumption? Most people come onto the podcast with something to sell, but you've come onto the podcast with the reverse of that, really.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, it's only been, the rights were sold maybe a couple of months ago, something like that. So there's a lot for them to do to gear up for production and all the rest of it. Plus, they want to make modifications. So, and it's a nice improvement as well. So I guess we just have to sit back and wait, and it'll be when it'll be. But I will announce the fact that they're available for sale and a forwarding website address as and when that happens, because I've still got the notify me link on my web page, and there's people still adding their email to that every day. So there'll come a point where I can notify everybody the new website and forward it on.
I'm just looking here through the images, and it's quite impressive that you've got an Agilent, lots of digit multimeter showing it bang on. You've got a Rigol 6.5 digit multimeter showing it right on. In fact, in the images, the only multimeter that's showing it with any variance is the EEV blog multimeter with I think it's 0.0002 volts. What's that? 20 microvolts?
Well, that's not my photographs. That's customer photographs.
Yeah, true.
I rotate them every now and then, so I get people that that top. There's two at the top, and they're from somebody in Austria, and the bottom one's from somebody in Switzerland, and I just rotate them every now and then, and I get a little bit of a story of what they're using them for. So that's, you can see that on my website. But yeah, it's nice to get that sort of feedback for something like that. Because I mean, the design of the PDVS2 Mini, if you do the calculations, it's a 20-bit D to A converter inside the unit, and that means across a 10-volt span, that is 10 microvolts. So that is your fifth digit. Most other companies, if they design something like that, they'd mask that last digit, and it would become a 100 microvolt resolution unit. But I work for myself. I've got nobody to answer to, so I just thought, well, I'm going to push the DAC to its absolute limit and let the customer have access to every single bit that's available on that 20-bit DAC, which is about just over 1 million bits on the 20 bits.
It's an impressive project, I have to say. And is there any part of this that you didn't design? Because I see that the circuit board looks quite interestingly made. It has like a sort of like a bottom board and then a board on top, like sort of like a daughter board near where the batteries rest. I see that the battery holders look good. It looks like the contacts are commercial, but the little hooks, did you make those?
The little, the hold batteries in, you mean?
Yeah.
No, that's an off-the-shelf battery holder.
Oh.
I was lucky to find those. And it was basically the battery holders, as you can see in the photographs, they drive the size or the width of the whole thing. So basically it was designed around those battery holders. The small daughter board is basically where your charger input goes into, and just to keep it separately from the main board where all the magic happens, as it were. Such a small board, everything's quite local together, so you've really got to take care to keep the noise away from the actual precision electronics, the op amps and all the rest of it. You've got to keep away from that. So that's why there is a daughter board with the lithium ion battery charger circuit on it, and the main board there. And that, I wanted to keep it small as possible, so I couldn't find an off-the-shelf enclosure to put it into, so I actually designed an enclosure, and a company in China CNC'd it and anodized it for me, and I was buying them from there. So everything was custom right down to the enclosure.
Wow, that makes the price even more impressive. Just because you're one-off, I just took a look here. The LM399AH is available in one-off quantities here in Canada for $27 each. That's a single component being $27. But if you add, battery holders aren't cheap. A lot of components on that board, I'm sure, aren't cheap. Microcontrollers have soared in price after COVID. Those battery holders look very specific. The CNC case, the acrylic top, I agree with you. It doesn't seem like there would be a lot of profit left, especially if you're paying yourself anything.
Well, I mean, when you look at it, I built it down. I specifically built it down to a price. That's why the acrylic cover, I laser cut that myself. I just buy the stock of 3mm acrylic and laser cut all the holes and engraved the PDVS2 Mini, reverse engraved the PDVS2 Mini on that cover there. So everything was done. I lost the keyboard from the original PDVS2 design. So it was, and just to give the customer the basics, it might not look as polished as maybe a Keysight unit or something like that, but it gives the customer exactly what they want, and that is a 0 to 10 volt output. But in saying that, in a nice aluminium CNC'd enclosure, so you can drive the price down. And yes, the LM399AHs are going up in price. I think when I first started, it was less than something like 19 UK pounds, whatever that was back then. It was a lot cheaper, and they've just gone up in price and up in price. And being a little home workshop, manually assembling and manually doing everything myself, it's kind of one of the reasons why I decided to basically, pass it on to somebody else, somebody who's more suitable to actually do mass manufacturer, as it were, and buy the components in a lot higher quantities to get the price down. That's what it was needing, and I couldn't do that.
For sure. And I will segue over to another section that I'm interested in, but we'll relate it to this. So how much of your design ideas, how much of your design implementation on the PDVS project was inspired by the insides of professional test hardware that you repair on your YouTube channel?
Unless it's subconscious, I would say nothing. Nothing at all. I just treated it as a project and went with the flow, and tried out a few ideas on paper and that sort of thing, to see where it would go and to see if it would all fit together. And in the case of the PDVS2 Mini, it fell together quite nicely. The battery holders and everything else, and the size of the LCD that was available and all that sort of thing, and the push button arrangement on the front of it. The double circuit boards inside. It was basically just fell together. It was one of those cases where it did just fall together quite nicely. The only part of it really that I would rely on my electronics history and experience would be something like the analog section of the PDVS2 Mini, where you've got to be really careful with the circuit layout. You can't just throw down tracks and op amps and a microcontroller in there and hope for a nice stable output. You've really got to be careful with the design, and being such a small design, the analog and digital sections are really close together. They're on the same board, and you've got to take steps to mitigate any noise and all that sort of thing. So it fell together rather nicely.
So where I'm coming from with this question is because recently I've left my job working at a Honda dealership as a mechanic, and now I work for a single person outfit. Basically, it's the boss and I. That's it. And I find myself working on Fords a lot. And every time I work on a Ford, especially a pickup truck, I'm like, never in my life would I have ever designed something so unrepairable as these Fords. And so I was just hoping there might be some, something you learned from fixing electronics that you're like, oh, never, if I ever design something, I'm never putting a stupid chip without a socket or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think part of that comes down to, well, the industry that you're in, they're notorious for making things hard to access, hard to repair, and that sort of thing, and hard to diagnose problems, even if you've got the right equipment to do so. It's notorious in that industry that you're in. But yeah, there was an element of, I wanted to keep it simple, and screws are on the top there. There's no funny clips to keep customers out or any of that sort of thing. I never scrubbed off the part numbers of the ICs or anything like that. Anybody could actually open it up and and see the design laid bare. Although the one thing I never did, which sometimes is a little bit controversial, I never published the circuit diagram for it. And a lot of people complain, not about the PDVS2 Mini, just in the industry in general, about the lack of circuit diagrams and not letting customers, repair it themselves. But when you're a one-man outfit and you don't have a lot behind you in terms of supporting something like that, you can easily get overrun if somebody got a hold of the circuit diagram. And they could easily replicate it, or more easily replicate it, I would say. So that's about the only thing I never did.
So feel free not to answer this, and if this goes south, I can edit it out in the end. But when it was coming to the end where you thought, okay, this may not be worth continuing to pursue, I'm just going to see if someone wants to buy the rights. Have you ever considered just open sourcing the whole project and saying to the community, you want one, go and make one?
No, not really. I know a lot of people have done that with their own designs and stuff like that. And I did get asked about it when the notice first went up on the website, but it's still a commercial product. It's still a viable commercial product, just not for a one-man outfit like me building them in low quantities. It's still very profitable for somebody that's maybe willing to make more of them and, you know, and get the bill of materials cost down by buying in quantity. So no, I never ever contemplated releasing it as open source or anything like that. You know, at the end of the day, I'm Scottish as well, and basically there's still money to be made in selling the rights to it, which is what I did. And you know, it's nice to have that in my pocket, as it were.
Oh, 100%. And designers definitely did deserve to get paid for their work. I'm coming at it from a different angle where I'm a YouTuber first, right? So someone like me, I make my money, quote unquote, it's not a lot of money, off the video and not products. And so
Yeah.
my brain automatically goes to whatever I design. If you want it, have at her. Here's everything you need and go to it. But it's interesting seeing it on the other side of someone who spent someone with some real skill developed a real product that is extremely useful and, like you said, viable as a commercial product. And so it's interesting to hear the other side of it. Someone who doesn't have their YouTube channel as the main product, at least in the case of that.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And yes, yeah, I mean, my YouTube channel and the commercial side of it kind of went in tandem, really. So yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think the business head came first in terms of the PDVS2 Mini.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely fair. And I would never put someone down who wanted to make money off their product. I just really love the opposing view of mine, which is great. It's the way it is.
Yeah.
However, do you think we're ever going to see a PDVS2 repair on someone else's YouTube channel? Because that's what you do. You buy a lot of broken gear and you fix it. I mean, that's the vast majority of your YouTube channel.
It's not happened yet. I mean, I had a couple of faulty ones over the years. I think 3 were faulty, and they were all self-induced by the owner. I think one of them put 40 volts across the output bananas from their power supply, just a mix-up of leads or something like that. And no matter what kind of protection you put on the design, yeah, it's going to blow something. And they were sent back to me for repair. Nobody I haven't seen anybody yet repair one, even off camera or on camera.
What would you say is your enjoyment out of repairing a broken test gear? Because, you know, like I said, it is the vast majority of your YouTube channel. What do you love about it?
Just the project. It becomes a project. The enjoyment of exploring what's wrong with it, exploring how to make it better, how to repair it, whatever that may be. And, you know, on the workbench right now, I've got another old power supply. And for anybody else, it would be, oh, let's just put that to parts. It's an ancient single rail power supply. Forget it. But I just like the project and of tearing it apart, you know, repairing it, making it better by, you know, a coat of paint or whatever that may be, and bringing it back to life. Just that start to end process is what I like doing. You know, it's just the fun of it. You know, there's no money involved as such. It's not my business. It's just the sheer enjoyment of doing that.
What happens to the test gear once they're fixed? Do they get resold? Do they get a new home somewhere, or do they just pile up in your lab?
A mixture of all of those. Sometimes I'll sell them. Sometimes I'll keep them. But I've got one particular supplier of faulty test gear, a local guy near me. unbelievably came to me, sent me an email and said, I've got all this faulty test gear. Do you want to do a deal somehow or other? And what's happened there is I'll take his test gear, repair it, make a video out of it, and then hand it back again. So, so I'm kind of doing everything really. And most of the stuff lately in the past year or so has been from that person, the faulty test gear, because as everybody will tell you who's in the game of repairing faulty test gear on a YouTube video or YouTube channel, it's extremely hard to buy faulty test gear now, because eBay prices, everybody's at it now, and eBay prices are just through the roof, and it's almost impossible without spending a lot of money on a faulty piece of test gear. So yeah, it's a mixture of all of those.
Is there, like, I see you have years of experience doing this. If you were to sort of sum up the repair of test gear into a couple of the most common faults, is that something you could do? Have you seen enough that you've discovered trends, or is it really a case by case still?
The number one fault that you might find in a piece of test gear is dried out power supply capacitors. That's number one, because the designs of some of the, the likes of your digital multimeters and stuff like that, they're of an age now where they are, 15 years old and maybe older. And that's the point where you start having capacitor problems, but large electrolytics are drying out on the gear. The Keithley 2001 series of videos that I've done on YouTube, a six series video on the Keithley 2001 6.5 digit multimeter repair. Huge repair was caused initially by electrolytic capacitor failures, and the power supply just goes haywire, over voltages everything, and before you know it, the whole thing's absolutely gone.
And I guess the mechanism by which it over voltages things, is it because the capacitors can't absorb the spikes anymore, and those spikes get transmitted through the electronics? Is that kind of the gist of it?
Partly that, but sometimes capacitors can short out as well. The surrounding power supply electronics can't handle ripple without sending spikes through maybe a 5-volt rail, something like that. And before you know it, it just takes one device to decide, I've had enough, I'm going to go short circuit, and then everything else starts to go as well. You burnt out boards and all the rest of it end up happening.
I did see when you took apart that Keithley 2001 DMM, you said, here are the capacitors. They don't look bad, but I'll take it apart, and regardless, I'm replacing these capacitors. I guess the goal is that when you have test gear that's that old, if you're taking it apart at all, you're doing any effort at all, you might as well replace the caps while you're at it, correct?
Some people do. I'm probably not as full on as that as most other people. I know a lot of other people will, they've got that mythology about it. They will replace them regardless, but I'm not so much, unless I can physically see a problem or measure a problem with a capacitor, then I'm sometimes likely just to leave it. Unless it's an expensive piece of gear, that's where I'll decide then, I think I'll replace the capacitors like I did with the Keithley 2001, because they are a premium bit of gear, for want of a better word. So in a case of that unit, it's worth replacing the capacitors just to be absolutely sure. But I don't always do it.
For those listening at home that are sort of interested in trying to fix electronics, just getting started, they've watched your videos, they've gained some confidence, they understand some principles. Can you recommend a couple of pieces of equipment or gear that you think they shouldn't skimp on? Like, 'cause there's a lot of recommendations for inexpensive equipment to get started, but is there anything that you would say nah, if you're gonna do this, you should bite the bullet and buy something decent right off the bat.
Decent soldering iron, absolutely, with various size tips. There's a lot of cheap Chinese, soldering irons available. They don't necessarily do what their specs say they can do, and I just find a decent soldering iron absolutely helps with that. Quality tips on that soldering iron. A hot air gun, a decent hot air gun, because nowadays everything's, as you know, is surface mount. So a hot air gun with the various tools for allowing you to, remove, 100-pin ICs, etc., from a circuit board. If you're using the right tool on that hot air gun, it's a lot easier to remove the IC than trying to wick it off or anything like that. So they're probably the two pieces of equipment that I'd say you definitely need. And if your eyesight's a little bit dodgy, like mine is at 59 years old, then you need a decent pair of magnifying glasses on as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll have to say, you're one of my few guests that turn on the webcam during this interview, and I have to say, you don't look 59. So keep it, whatever you're inhaling in your workshop, keep doing that.
I might look all right on the outside, but you haven't seen the insides, Dan.
Look, I have a question I ask it to all of my guests. Can I shoot you that question now?
Sure.
So just imagine you get a giant grant to start the company of your dreams. Just think unlimited money. It doesn't have to be profitable, but it does have to provide a service or a product. What kind of company would you start?
Wow.
There are no wrong answers here. The question is open-ended on purpose.
Well, I think it would be electronics related. I don't know. It's something maybe to support your universities and colleges, which do teach you a lot about the theory. Maybe something to help with the practical side, because like I said earlier, I came from the practical side of learning on the job, and there's absolutely value in that. But not to say there's not value in the your universities and all the rest that there is, but something to help out on the practical side of helping people along, something along those lines maybe.
What sort of, are you thinking of maybe like a workplace that prospective students can come and practice on gear? Like what would that look like?
Maybe something like that. But you do have maker shops and all the rest of it now, but something that can cover maybe the online aspect or the YouTube aspect of it, have that in there as well as hands-on in an open workshop sort of area, something like that. I mean, that's just off the top of my head, but yeah, definitely something to do with the practical side and teaching the practical side, whether that's on camera, video, or in person in some sort of shop somewhere.
Yeah, I think the practical side is very important, and I think even, I hazard to say, but maybe more important, at least in my industry, I know it's like this, where the practical side is heavily affected by your mentor. So if an apprentice mechanic ends up in a shop where their mentor makes them do the grunt work and sweep up and whatever, then it don't really show them anything, then they get a lot more learning from me at the college. Whereas some shops have a mentor that is like way more intelligent than me and way more theoretical than me, and they teach the student, the apprentice, all sorts of things, and then they get to my semester and they're essentially just taking my class to pass the class. Right? Is that sort of the sort of thing that you would say is true in on the job electronics repair as well?
Yeah, it comes back to the drill instrumentation and controls company I worked at and being mentored by this one person, and I was lucky. He was a guru. He was way ahead of his time in a lot of things, and I was just lucky to to end up at the company when he was there, and I'd no aspirations at that time to go away, to go back to college or university or anything like that. I was getting paid money for basically a hobby. A job. It wasn't a job to me; it was a hobby. So, the mentor side of it was quite important, and I absolutely loved the job. And yeah, and like I said earlier, I learned a lot of different aspects of electronics through that company, and that counted for an absolute bucket load of experience, etc., over the years. So yeah, I mean, I think the ideal thing for somebody looking to start out in electronics is, yes, go to college, go to university, absolutely, but try and find somewhere like what you were saying, is that can give you that mentorship and push you forward, and not push you back, as it were.
Yeah, not a lot of component level electronics shops these days, though. Like not many places do repair. Not many places do, even fewer places do sort of practical design. It's all kind of CAD, and yeah, I'm not sure how a electronics enthusiast would get hands-on experience these days without holding that degree first to get into the door. I'm not sure. I don't know if you have insight on that.
Well, over in the UK anyway, there's two. If you want to get into the medical side of it and that sort of thing, you really need to have your degree and all the rest of it. You won't even get in the door. But there's still jobs out there. There's still companies in the city near me that will hire the enthusiast level without a degree technicians and electronics guys. And basically it comes down to if you're doing it at home and you've got a project at home, take it to your interview, that sort of thing, and show them what you're doing, and it can get you in the door, and there's still jobs out there. But yeah, you're right, it's a lot harder possibly nowadays to get experience of all the different aspects of electronics at one company. You probably need to jump around. I think I was maybe just very lucky. I joined a company that was doing absolutely everything back in the day, and maybe they're not as common now. I don't really know.
For sure. So what would you say is next for your YouTube channel? What do you think is coming down the pipes to try to tease a little bit to get some of the listeners to go check out your channel?
I've still got a shelf full here of faulty test gear, and just making my way through those. It's quite varied as well. There's everything from oscilloscopes to power supplies on that workbench, and I'm just attacking them one at a time, really. I've got a power supply on my workbench right now off the back of the one I've just posted on YouTube the other day, and it's in a little bit of a worse state of affairs, so it's more of a renovation than a simple repair. So I'm going to enjoy that renovation process, and that's the ones I like doing, and I've got a few more on the shelf waiting to get on with.
I've got just one more cheeky question for you. Is there any possibility for your hardcore fans to buy maybe some of the last stock of the PDV S2 Mini with a signature on the side or something, or is it completely over, no chance?
No, everything went to the new company. I've kept two back here. One of them's a little bit of a special one. It doesn't use the same microcontroller. It's an older one. When I was doing different variations on the design, and it's a STM32 powered unit, so I'll keep that one, and I've just got one other one. So there's no stock, I'm afraid, for anybody at the moment.
So you've got to be going to some sort of Scottish or British maker fair at some point where people can bring up their units and have you sign them, right? Is that doable?
I've never been to one. I'm not sure that there is any locally around here. There might be one but it's not. It's the northeast of Scotland. It's quite rural to a certain extent. Aberdeen is a local city, and it's not got a large electronics maker, sort of environment that I'm aware of. Not like that I've seen, down south in England and around the world. It's not the same. So I don't really go out and about. I keep myself to myself in my own little workshop.
Fair enough. That's kind of the same for a lot of makers. That I think that was the goal of the maker fairs, is to try to get the makers, outdoors and sort of seeing each other instead of just themselves. And I mean, I completely understand. I had plans to go to the Open Source Hardware Summit in Montreal, which is only a couple hours drive from here in Ottawa, and it just didn't happen. I got way too busy, so I stayed. I remain a typical maker, aka remain in my basement.
I mean, not to say I wouldn't do it. If I'm going to do it, I'd probably do it big time. I don't mind traveling to somewhere, like that Open Source Hardware Summit. I maybe do something like that one day. I think it'd be great fun. I've always got aspirations of flying around the world and meeting some of the YouTubers that I've become quite friendly with over the years, and it'd be great to see them in person.
Can you recommend a couple of YouTubers for the audience to take a listen to? I mean, I've been recommending tons of channels over the years, but I mean, I'd like to hear who you're watching.
Dave Jones, the EEV blog, goes without saying, really. There's DefPom for his mailbags and his repairs, and there's SDG Electronics as well. They're quite different, all three of them, but that's probably the ones that I would look at mostly. I don't have a great big catalogue of YouTubers that I actually go and look at every single day. Otherwise, I'd never be able to hold the soldering iron much. But those would be the main ones.
Sounds good. Any closing thoughts that you would love to leave the listeners with?
Just keep the soldering iron at hand. Keep the movement going forward.
Yeah, basically. If you're just don't leave it on overnight, please. That would be bad.
No. When you've got a workshop like mine, and when you're doing metrology, the PDVS2 Mini, I have to leave some of the equipment on 24/7 just for stability reasons and an air-conditioned workshop. So luckily, I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah, there we go. That's over. So I want to thank you very much for taking your time today, especially since I was in a bind. My schedule became really tight all of a sudden. And so I thank you very much for clearing some time in your busy schedule to have a chat with me today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's been great.
So before we leave, I do want the listeners to consider a couple things. One, all the links that you're going to need are down in the show notes if you're on a audio podcast, or in the description if you're on YouTube. And I want you to go check out Ian Scott Johnston's channel. Sorry about that. But also, I want you to, at the end of the month, if you have a couple extra dollars that's just burning a hole in your pocket, I want you to check out the Patreon link as well. You can join his Patreon and support him for what he does. No early access, correct? Is that the goal?
That's right. Yeah. No early access, I'm afraid.
So it's a tip jar, and
it is.
And I'm sure Ian would really appreciate that, as would I. And on that note, thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to thank you guys for listening. I want you guys to if you go over to his YouTube channel, I want you to just, make a nice comment about where you came from. And hopefully Ian's got time and he'll heart your comment. Here's hoping.
Will do.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Catch you on the next one.